Hello, everybody, and welcome to this interview. So today I'm joined by, yeah, some amazing people from Clusters Fosters, and we're gonna talk about, relieving extreme suffering, and in particular, digging a little bit into how DMT actually may bubble up to the surface as a very promising therapy for this pretty awful condition. So how about if you don't mind, like maybe introducing yourself with a couple sentences, and then we'll dive into questions.
So I'm Bob Wold. I'm the founder of Cluster Busters, and for the last 25 years of my life, I've been advocating for my community and doing a lot of advocating for psychedelic treatments.
And I'm Joe Stone, and I'm an episodic cluster headache patient. And for 43 years, have had thousands and thousands of cluster headaches. And about 6 years ago, discovered these psychedelics to treat my clusters as well. And very well managed by them.
Hi, I'm Joe McKay. I'm a retired New York City firefighter that developed cluster headache after working 6 months at Ground Zero. I struggled for a very long time trying quantum treatment, and I found Cluster Busters, and it's helped me in more ways than you can imagine. I found a treatment for my cluster headaches first and foremost. Psilocybin also helped me realize that I had PTSD and made me sort out and help. And it also helped me with an addiction problem that I picked up after I retired from firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I remember seeing in your presentation that it's on YouTube about your journey was that you tried something like 70 different treatments before you encountered psychedelics. I remember you listing all of these substances. If you talk a little bit about that.
Cluster headaches for over 45 years. The first 20 years of that, I was only using pharmaceuticals and whatever treatments they would give me for my cluster headaches. And I had tried over 70 different medications in hundreds of combinations. And there were only a few that ever gave even partial relief out of those hundreds of combinations. And the only reason I use any pharmaceuticals now is for treating other things that I need to deal with in life, but not my cluster headaches. So,
yeah, of those that long list of treatments, you said like none of them provided like full relief of any sort, but like if you could like maybe mention the top 5 that provided some relief and like maybe that other people find useful.
Yeah, there's a short list. So, high flow oxygen works pretty well for me to acutely. So, I use it when I feel an attack coming on, and what might normally be a 45-minute full-blown attack, I could sometimes get it to end in 10 minutes rather than 45. And it works for the majority of people with clusters. It doesn't always work completely, but it usually provides some relief. And even if it just knocks the pain down from a 10 to an 8, that's just huge for us. So that never failed me even at 45 years. Some of the ergotamines, DHE, which is delivered several different ways. First time I was using that, I was giving myself injections. And I would have to give myself an injection with each attack. And in the 5 years that I was using that, I probably took 10,000 injections of DHE.
Wow.
And it would work in 5 or 10 minutes, but that's a lot of injections with very large needles, and I looked really bruised for 5 years. There was a medication available that was called methosurgide. Its brand name is Sansert. And that was something that we would take every day. There's a little 2 milligram pill. It was a very low dose. And what that was a LSD molecule that they added a lot of things to eliminate the hallucinogenic effect. But they dirtied up the molecule so much that it caused a lot of other side effects.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were able to work around those side effects, but it would cause some really serious side effects if people were on it for a long time. If you're going to be on it for cluster headaches, you're going to be on it for the rest of your life every day. But the market got so small because of the side effects it was causing for a lot of people. They pulled it from the market. So something that was really working really well for a lot of people got pulled from the market. So one of the 3 things that was working was pulled from us. Sometimes steroids would work, but you can only take those like twice a year for 10 days, and then you have to stop. It's sort of a transitional treatment where they give it to you while they're also giving you other medications, and hopefully to let you live the next 10 days until hopefully the next medication's going to work. But they rarely do, so then you end up trying other medications on top of there. But that's so, out of that, those were really the only ones that ever helped me out of the 70 that I tried. And the thing with cluster headaches is when they prescribe you something, it's always off-label. It was always created for something else. And they always give you higher doses than anybody else is on for that medication for whatever it is they're treating. People take a blood pressure medication that's usually 80 milligrams a day for people. It's given up to 1,200 milligrams a day for people with cluster headaches. And it doesn't always work for the majority of people, but it takes really high doses for most people to get any relief at all. And it was the same with other medications. It's not used as much anymore, but lithium was prescribed for a long time for people. But also, once again, at very high doses. And some people could, kind of stabilize with side effects after a while. Other people were just completely drugged out of their minds, trying to hold a job with very high doses of medications like that. So that was the first 20 plus years of my cluster life.
Yeah. How about you guys? Were there any treatments that also worked in some capacity? Or
I think both of us probably have tried the vast majority of those as well. Ergotamine was another one that was on the market for a while. We did. One of those classes of medications that's fairly new are called CGRP medications. And, those include Emgality is the one. And we actually had some success as a cluster community getting that as not really an off-label medication for the first time. And so if a migraine patient does 1 injection of Emgality, we do 3. And it's a monthly injection. And that's been beneficial for some people. And CGRPs are coming out. And it's the calcitonin gene related peptide that is targeting. But outside of that, it's the same story for me. That
Yeah. For me, I had, when I first got clusters, steroids would help, like for a week or 2. And once I came off of it, the attacks would come back. I relied a lot on oxygen. I had sumatriptan injections that I used that would help me, but they were limited. I could only use it twice a day. And I was getting 8 attacks. And the more I used the Imitrex, the less effective it became. And it was actually quite expensive for some time. Up close to $5,000 a month. It's $4,500 a month at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's come down a lot since then, but still, it's not a really great option for people with cluster headache. That's another medication that Bob had mentioned that's written off label. Do we want to get into something?
Well, when thing that I remember is reading from anecdotes with Imitrex is that it stops working over time, and also I've heard from people that it makes sometimes the headaches worse over time.
Yeah, and that was something that was discovered by the patient group itself.
Yeah,
because I was around when it first came out in the late 90s, and everybody was swearing how great it was and like a lifesaver because it worked so well for those that could get it or afford it. But But then as we talk more online, we would ask somebody to talk how they're doing, and they're going, well, Imitrex is still working for me, but I don't know. I used to get 3 attacks a day. Now I'm getting 7 attacks a day. And they're just terrible. They're getting worse. Thank God I've got Imitrex. So then we start talking to other people that had the exact same story that they were using as much Imitrex they could get their hands on. And their cluster attacks were getting worse, more frequent and more severe. So once again, I started reaching out to some doctors to see if they had heard anything about this. And they haven't, because, any neurology practice might see 1 or 2 cluster patients in their lifetime, let alone in the same day. So there's no way they're putting evidence like that together. And somebody's just coming in and telling them that, yeah, Imitrex still works. And they'll want to be complaining about the clusters getting worse. But so they actually followed up on that and did a study and showed that Imitrex use increased the severity and increased the number of attacks. So that's something we've just been kind of warning people about for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing that does it, the emgality that we had spoken about before, the emgality will work for me, but it could take up to 6 weeks to really take effect. So so it's, I started, but that's for 6 weeks. I rely on other methods to avoid right now.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's jump into one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you guys is maybe what's special about like DMT, because in the sort of like some research that we've done at Qualia Research Institute, kind of like gathering like possible methods for aborting cluster headaches. It was kind of like known that of course like very largely thanks to you guys' work that like psilocybin, LSD really helped. And then like I stumbled upon some people who said like, yes, but like DMT is like in some sense even better. And I'm curious if you maybe like describe a little bit like what makes this DMT special.
Well, it is very special. And we've been learning more and more about how special it is over the last few years. But it acts completely different than psilocybin and LSD for cluster headaches. The classic psychedelics, we use those in a pulse method where you take a dose at 1 day and 5 days later you take another dose. 5 days later you take another dose. And hopefully you end the cycle early. So rather than having a 3-month-long cycle, you might end it in 10 days. You can take maintenance doses in between your cycles and completely eliminate an upcoming cycle, because we know exactly when our cycles are going to start. I mean, if they start the first week of September for you, they're going to start the first week of September for the next 30 years. And it's good on the same length of the cycle usually. I mean, it could change a couple of weeks here and there, but so that's the way those psychedelics work. DMT, we're finding, works incredibly well as an acute treatment. And once again, at low doses, even at the other psychedelics we use to treat our clusters long term, is at a relatively low dose, a quarter of a recreation dose, and very little psychedelic effects. Usually, people describe that as like a 2-beer buzz. They take a gram of dried mushroom. But once again, we're on the low range of doses. It's not a microdose of DMT. But with a regular vape pen, it's like usually 1 inhalation. And if people are using those pens for recreational use, even instructions on the back usually say, well, take 3 inhalations, lay back and the 3rd inhalation, you'll start seeing some things. 1 inhalation will end the attack. For most people, it seems. Everybody's reporting the exact same thing. Which is interesting with DMT that everybody always comes back and reports the same thing about DMT. It could end that attack in less than a minute. 30 seconds, 45 seconds.
37 seconds for me.
37 seconds.
37 seconds for me. Nothing and even came close.
Right. And the other thing that's really good about that is you could take the 1 inhalation. you can wait 30 seconds, and if that cluster is not gone completely, then you know it's time to take another inhalation.
Yes.
You don't have to wait 2 hours into a psilocybin trip to find out, well, my head hasn't cleared, I'm going to have to take some more. You know within a minute whether or not you need to take some more. And most people are able to abort that attack within 2 at the most, sometimes 3, depending on how bad it is. But personally, I can, and other people can attest to this. The only other thing that you feel from taking that dose is you can actually visualize a switch being shut off in the middle of your brain. I hear a click as the switch is shut off, and the pain is completely gone. It doesn't, slowly go away. It's a switch that just shuts it off completely.
Wow.
So I'll let these two guys.
Yeah, but it does. It's strange. Like it doesn't ramp down or anything. Like Bob's saying, it's just it's like boop, something pops and it goes off. And for me personally, and I think Joe and a lot of other people that have been trying it, as of late, could say it's been a game changer for us. So when Bob mentioned, the pulse regime that we do once every 5 days, the more we take, you go into that, the first dose, the second dose, the frequency and the severity of the attacks continue to go down. But for those first couple of doses in between, you're still getting attacks, and that's where the DMT comes in. And because the DMT gets out of your system so fast, it doesn't seem to be interfering with the work that the psilocybin is doing within your system as well. So it's been a game changer. It's knocking the cycle out, and it's getting us rescue relief in less than a minute. And it's game changer. I use the word game changer because a lot of times our attacks will come at night when we go after we go to sleep, and it usually after an attack, a half hour to 40 minutes later, I try to go back to sleep, knowing full well that in another hour or so I'm going to get another attack. But having a DMT vape pen right next to my bedside allowed me to hit that pen, and within a minute or two, I'm closing my eyes and I'm going back to sleep. So it's also improved my quality of sleep, which is very important as well.
And one of the things that we've discovered too is that there doesn't appear to be a tolerance issue. So you can, for somebody that's getting clusters 5, 6, 7 times a day or whatever, you could do 5 or 6, treatments of DMT a day, and the effectiveness stays the same, and which is really remarkable. And, I just want to say also, I'm very fortunate that I live in the state of Colorado where access to this medication, has gained a lot of traction, and I'm very fortunate. But it's one of the things that it's very frustrating for us to talk with other patients about this discovery we've made, and then we have to say, but we don't know how to get you access to this medicine.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask is, what aspect of the DMT experience would you say is kind of like tapping into its pain relief? Because like for a little bit of context, there is this retreat facility in Mexico called the Ulocina Retreat.
Yes.
The only place I know of that, they kind of like targeted these, psilocybin and DMT education specifically for various like headache disorders, cluster headaches being a main one, migraines, hemicrania continua, several related ones. And talking to the founder, she said that she suspects that kind of like the aspect of DMT that has to do with kind of the pain relief is the intense body buzz that happens like just a few seconds after you start to feeling the effect, and maybe less kind of the visual hallucinatory component. Is that something that resonates with you guys?
Well, I'd love to comment on that.
Yes, please.
So I know the founder of that, and she actually suffers from her headache disorders, and psychedelics kind of changed her life, and that's why she's doing what she's doing. At least for myself, as a layman and just a citizen scientist, I think it's completely different from what you just said that she explained it does.
Okay.
And so I'll tell you here for the first time being recorded what my theory is.
Yes.
And 50 years from now, when you prove it, you could come and put a flower on my tombstone and say, I know you told me. So here's my theory. So we have natural DMT in our body. They're not sure where it comes from. I don't believe. There's been theories about where it comes from. But they always say, but it's really such a tiny amount. We don't even know if it does anything or why it's there. And every time they say that, the only thing I could think of is that was the exact same thing that Albert Hoffman said when he took the LSD and got onto his bicycle. He was taking a very tiny amount, so he'd be fine to go home. Well, he found out that very tiny amount was going to make quite a bicycle trip for him. And compare DMT, the power of DMT, to the power of the other psychedelics. I think that it is very powerful. But we have some stored DMT in our body, and we're not sure what it's doing. My theory is a cluster headache is triggered when our DMT level in our brain drops below a certain level.
Oh.
And by inhaling DMT, you're restoring it to the level that it needs to be at to not cause such terrible pain. And your next cluster attack, something's making that DMT level drop again, so you need to give a little boost to get it back to where it should be. So that's my theory, that it's very mechanical in that way, and it's not as tied to some deeper thoughts and consciousness. It's like everything is part of consciousness, but I think it's a biological error that our bodies are seeing by a drop in the stores of DMT.
It's really interesting also that melatonin specifically has been implicated as part of the cluster headache issue too. And, we've been talking about these night attacks and getting woken up multiple times in the middle of the night when we get REM sleep. And so, there's this idea that melatonin is part of the process. And, we understand also that, DMT is often extracted from melatonin. And so it's a very curious sort of relationship there that's going on. And, this is really sort of a new discovery for us the last few years. And we have 25 years in LSD and psilocybin. And really, this is a newer discovery for us. And so we have a lot of questions than we have answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Any comments? And is the body buzz in some way kind of related to the relief of the pain, or anything you could identify, or no, still a mystery?
I'll let the people like yourself and the scientists take care of that. All I know is that it works. And from my perspective as a former firefighter, when I see somebody in pain and that needs help, like that's what I'm focused on, like getting them the help they need, because they're really in a really dark and painful place. And we'll let guys like you and the scientists figure it out. But in the meantime, we got to get these people the help.
Yes.
I think, we're really working at sub-perceptual doses here.
Yeah.
And we call them sub-psychedelic doses. But if we're experiencing any of that euphoria, I think some of it might really just come from the relief that we're not going to go through this trauma, because we generally don't experience much of anything in the doses that we're taking.
Yeah.
If you close your eyes, maybe some geometric patterns and things like that. But I think Joe said that the world turns a little yellow.
That's when I know my sweet spot with the vape pen is when I'm done with that first hit. If I start seeing the color in the room dim a little bit, kind of like turn a little yellowish, that's my sweet spot. I know I don't need to take it anymore. And then I'll just breathe until the end of the attack. So
I think I remember somebody telling me that kind of golds and yellows are very positive auras that surround the head of people that are really positive, good people. Because, everybody's always talking, for years and years, they talk about, on see your aura.
Yeah.
And, well, you've got a purple aura I'm really worried about. So, and I've, using psilocybin, I've seen some people the only ones I've seen have had that type of a yellow or gold aura. So, there you go. I'll get that deep into the, psychedelic world.
One thing I've thought of for some time is like, yeah, if we lived in a really sane society with kind of like a strong compassionate component, in every building there would be a kind of like a similar to like break in case of fire. There would be like break in case of break in case of cluster headache, and there would be like a DMT vape and fully charged.
Which would be really nice. Yeah.
I would love to help you with that.
Okay.
One of the side effects, if you will, of cluster headache is compassion. And it's very interesting coming from a suffering perspective. But as a community, we would all agree that all of us have a very compassionate component to ourselves. And, it's the experience of that suffering that I think he is behind a lot of that.
At our conferences, where there's a couple hundred people there dealing with cluster headaches, every one of them has really high levels of empathy that you will not find out in society. Yeah, it's like 100% of people with cluster headaches and their caregivers, it's like they have empathy for everyone else and any type of suffering and, whatever they're going through. And we need to evolve more quickly for more people to get some baseline empathy, because we really don't have enough of.
Yeah. What for somebody who's like listening to this interview and like maybe has a family member or themselves that suffer from clusters, but is like hesitant to try psychedelics, either for legal reasons, accessibility reasons, or just like fear of a bad trip. What would you have to say to them?
Well, I would say that we deal with this all the time. Probably 50% of our community refuses to use psychedelics because if they can't get it at Walgreens and the government hasn't put their stamp of approval on it, they won't use it unless it's something over the counter like melatonin that they can pick up at the pharmacy while they're picking up their prescriptions. And for the last 50 or 60 years in this country, the war on drugs has just been a scare tactic. Everything you hear from them is how dangerous they are. And so a lot of people have to overcome that. A lot of people have to wait till they could change jobs where they're, afraid of getting drug tested and losing their careers. Other people have careers that are really high level where they're probably not get drug tested, but if it gets out that they're using psychedelics, they'll never win another election. Believe me, I've helped all of them and go through, and a lot of them wait 10 years to try it until they're feeling safe enough to try it. But almost eventually, when they come to our conference or meet other people and find out that, holy crap, this might really work and be safe, and the first thing they'll tell us is, well, I wish I tried this 10 years ago. They all say that, everybody. No matter what level of relief they end up getting, it's just like, oh crap, my doctor never prescribed this, tell them. But we've gone through a lot of education with professionals and the providers, and all of them are now sending us their worst cases. The ones that they are afraid that they can no longer save that person to life, they give our website. And we talk every one of them through it. So if they get on our website, send us an email to the info account and just contact us, and somebody will contact them. We get contacted a lot by caregivers. It's like, my wife's had cluster headaches for 20 years. Nothing's working. I decided to reach out. Do you think there could be some help? And it's like, well, get on a Zoom call and let's talk. And we'll talk through it, talk each individual patient through it. So the more publicity we get out there, the more help we're going to need to be able to educate people and to help people and walk it through it, because every person is different with any medication they're on, and how they metabolize things and what medications they've been on for 35 years. They've been on high dose of lithium for 35 years or 10,000 shots of Imitrex before they try it. It takes some time to work around those things.
I personally, I knew about this treatment for 20 years. And I didn't do it for 20 years for professional reasons, for other reasons. But one of the reasons was because when I was a young guy, I did a psychedelic experience on mushrooms about age 24, and I was totally uneducated. I did a massive dose, and it scared the living daylights out of me. And I had no idea what to expect, and I stayed away from it. I thought, okay, that was my experience. I don't need to do this anymore. And then there's this ironic reality that, oh my gosh, I'm in this place. I had a 6-month-long cycle. It was awful, and I was going to do anything to get rid of it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole and try this. And, it took 20 years for me. And then it took 2 weeks for me to go, oh my God, what have I been missing? And I work with patients a lot for cluster busters, and we hear the story a lot. We've worked with judges. We work with, politicians. We work with people that just can't come out. I shoot sports plays. 2 weeks ago, I worked with a Catholic priest who, came to us and said, I've been avoiding this, but I have to try it. And so it's a very common theme for all of us. And part of what we're really trying to do here is to get rid of the stigma, because this is medicine. This is real medicine. It's powerful. And, like any medicine, it's dose specific, and there's a lot of education that needs to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to pick up on one thing too, talking about what Bob had mentioned before about people that have cluster headache and how they lose their jobs. They also, a lot of times you lose your job, you lose your healthcare, and in the fact that the understanding from your family isn't always there. They don't realize what they're going through. And so people have lost spouses and divorcing and what have you, and that just makes it a lot worse. And what we tell people is, and it's so very frustrating to know that more than half of our community is so afraid to try psychedelics. We got our job to do to get rid of the stigma, to destigmatize it, to let people know that you don't need a dose that's going to be very heavily psychedelic. It could be very light, and you could also do it, but while you're sleeping. I know single moms from the Midwest that take a very low dose. They sleep through the experience, and they wake up and they're able to take care of their children and go about their day normally. And it's been a game changer for so many people in our community, and we have so many other people that we need to get.
And to touch base real quickly on that, or try to. As far as relationships go, they're really tough. 50% of marriages end in divorce. We did a large survey. 30% of cluster sufferers end up in divorce strictly because of cluster headaches. So add that to the 50%, and you're like, the chances are 80% against you keeping a marriage. So having that spouse stick with you through this is incredible, and we have nothing but respect for those to say. And I don't have any hard feelings about the ones that lead. It's like, that's the normal thing for people to do. It's normal for this to end relationships. And I've been back in this thing about problems with people not doing it. I've been involved particularly in several child custody cases where the spouse that was leaving was either threatening to and we talked them out of it, or was actually going to courts to try to get full custody because their spouse is using psychedelic drugs in the house and I can't leave my kids there. And so I've helped people. I knew one guy from Milwaukee that flew down to the U.S. Virgin Islands, a particular islet, to get his treatments twice a year. He had to fly to the Virgin Islands to be able to get his treatment because he didn't want anything to happen in the States or let anybody know that he was using these treatments. So just that's one more of 1,000 things that people can't get access because of. Yeah. It's like, yeah, these things are going to destroy my life, and this might be able to stop that, but then that'll destroy my life. And there's a lot of really hard decisions people need to make.
Yeah, that's terrible. And I hadn't thought of that possible barrier, but that's very significant as well. Yeah. One if let's say is hypothetical, hopefully not hypothetical, but if let's say like a billionaire or just somebody with hundreds of millions of dollars was bought into the cause. He's like, okay, like, yes, I understand cluster headaches is such a big problem. I want to do whatever I can to help. I'm gonna give $100 million for the cause. How would you suggest to utilize those resources for kind of like maximum effect? I know not to put you on the spot. Maybe you haven't thought about this particular, but
believe me, I've thought about this.
Okay.
And there's a book out there now that's called Psychedelic Outlaws that explains the last 25 years of my life and struggling to make that happen. And one of the biggest issues has always been funding. Research is very, very expensive. But we've done an awful lot of research on donations from within the community. The patients themselves have funded a lot of research. We've got research going on now at Yale. They've already done a cluster headache study with psychedelics at Yale. 2 of them actually, and another one's going to be coming up. And we're going to be putting one together on DMT. But yeah, if there was $100 million invested in cluster headaches and physical treatments and not mental health treatments, I'm going to make a lot of people mad now. If the $100 million was put into treating a physical condition, there would already be an FDA-approved drug on the market at these doses. And that they would be able to be prescribed off labels to treat other things. And yeah, you get us to be able to direct $100 million, and there will be a FDA-approved treatment available within 5 years.
Yeah.
8 years.
I think the outreach is important too, right? You need to get to these people and make them aware. And a huge problem we have too within our community is misdiagnosis. But there was a time when the medical community thought that only men could get cluster headache. It's also in the book that Bob mentioned, Psychedelic Outlaws. And there's been a lot of misconceptions about cluster headache and a lot of misdiagnosis. So educating the medical community on proper diagnosis, reaching out to the people in the cluster headache community to let them know we're here and there is help and there are other options. I think 2 big factors would be where funds could be in best bang for you. And then obviously the huge thing is the research.
I think it's important to state too that this isn't just cluster headaches, right? We're talking about primary headache disorders in general. Migraine is, one of the, most common conditions there is. And what is about 1 out of how many people have headache disorders in the world?
So between 1 out of 6 and 1 out of 7 people live with headache disorders. There's 40 million people living in the U.S. with headache disorders, most of them with migraine. And we get new members coming to us all the time that have been misdiagnosed for 35 years as having migraines. And they were just finally diagnosed with cluster headaches because somebody probably either put some of those words to them. So they would be completely mistreated for 35 years. But that's 40 million people that we think could be helped with psychedelics.
Yeah.
And that $100 million worth of research would be able to help 40 million people off the bat. Besides all the other pain conditions that are out there, there's dozens of pain conditions where research signals are pointing to the fact that psychedelics are probably going to be the best treatment for whatever that pain condition is.
The last novel drug brought to market for pain was Lyrica in 1993, and everything else since then has been opiate derivatives. So I mean, this is a really an area that needs to be explored.
And there's even the idea of there's a substance L-bromol, right? LSD bromol.
Yeah. I'll jump in and you can finish your thoughts. So, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I've been making a lot of noise about for 25 years is that one of the worst outcomes of scheduling psychedelics in Schedule 1 and make them almost impossible to research is that you can't do research to play around with the molecule a little bit and develop something else that it's going to work even better for a different pain condition or a different medical, a mental health condition. We did a real small scale study in Germany back in 2010 and discovered a compound called bromo LSD, which had been around for years, was actually used as a placebo in earlier psychedelic trials. And it was the LSD molecule that was tampered with a little bit, and they added some things to it to eliminate the hallucinogenic effects. And 100% of the people that were in this small study broke their cycles within 2 doses. It seemed to work even better than the LSD that people were using. And trying to take that small study out of Germany and get it replicated. Since then, we haven't been able to get it to pass in phase 1 right now, and millions of dollars donated into that research that needs another $20 million to be able to get it to possibly a phase 3. But had LSD been in the research labs for the last 50 years, there could have been all sorts of things that were developed using that as a base molecule. That's found all the time when somebody's looking to treat something in research, and it's like, well, we think this will really help with blood pressure. And then they start hearing stories about, well, that didn't help the blood pressure much, but holy crap, my sex life is a lot better right now. And now they're making billions of dollars because of something else that they discovered while they were messing around with molecules and looking for something else to treat. So it's very common in pharma, ever since it's been around, that people find something that works for something else, and it's really easy to take that into the lab and do real cheap modifications on the molecules and find out if it'll treat something similar. And so that's been the biggest loss of the war on drugs, is all that research to multiple up.
And imagine if we could take that same idea with bromo and do it with DMT. Yeah, I mean, if somebody could modify the molecule so, we could remove the psychedelic effect, and then we wouldn't have to worry about what dosing level we were at and the effectiveness of that and the way that so that $100 million, wow. I mean, what could we do with that? I mean, a lot.
Yeah. Sounds like of course, Alexander Shulgin's research program of tryptamines I have known and loved.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of is there any tryptamine in that list that maybe also helps with clusters? One thing I wanted to note is, and for the audience, very important to know, there's a big difference between DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. I interviewed somebody with cluster headaches for whom DMT really works, and he said that 5-MeO-DMT didn't really help, unfortunately, although I think that maybe depends on the individual. But I'm just curious if in the list of tryptamines, is there any other promising leads potentially?
I have to see the list, but some of us try just about anything, just to test it out. Number one, to see if it might work better, and test it out before you recommend it to anybody else when something else comes out.
Yeah.
But doing all this on this citizen science level is really difficult to collect enough data on any of these new things that come out to really get a good feel of whether or not it's working. A lot of people that LSD or psilocybin worked for, they're like, I don't need anything else. Why would I want to try something else? Because, why would I want to do that? So getting volunteers to try different molecules and be able to collect enough data takes money, and it takes money just to be able to either start that research project and publicize it and get the word out to people to see that, to find all of those that would want to do it. And believe me, at least our community is really I've really been willing to try something else. I mean, LSA seeds, people were using that a lot early on. The seeds were actually a lifesaver for people especially in the UK, because years ago, everybody in England was able to jump on their bike and ride down to the corner pharmacy, or whatever they call them over there, and buy magic mushrooms in England. So everybody with cluster headaches in England was using mushrooms, and they were just hopping on their bike and going and buying. I don't know what year it was, but when Tony Blair was trying to get reelected back in the 80s, was that? I don't know. He decided to get more votes. He decided to get tough on drugs and made psilocybin illegal, so nobody now could go and buy their mushrooms. And now all these cluster patients are like, well, now what do we do? And so I was talking to some people in Denmark who actually started looking at it and looking at other things, that found the seeds and tried them, and she was able to give her husband those. She was a nurse practitioner, and they worked wonderfully for him. So then we were able to tell everybody, especially over in Europe, that here's something you can legally order online, and you're going to ship to your door. You go to your guard shop and buy a bunch of bags of morning glory seeds. But we didn't recommend that because it takes so many seeds to be able to get a high enough dose. But there are other seeds that you could, it's like 2 or 3 into 100 seeds. So you just soak them. And we did research on that at Yale and showed how well that worked and how low doses were working. So yeah, we've tried a lot of different types.
Yeah, it sounds like one possible research project that might be very helpful would be, flying a bunch of volunteers to, let's say, like Brazil or something, and with a bunch of chemists, just like try out like hundreds of tryptamines and just see which ones may have like the quality of DMT with other hallucinations and able to cure cluster headaches. Yeah.
Well, what happens then is Big Pharma hears that. So they get their chemists working on, well, can you take that tryptamine and can you mess around with it a little bit then so that we could get something approved that sell to everybody. When we started this, there was zero research for cluster headaches. None. So when we went out to try to publicize what was happening and get the word out to people, and Big Pharma was seeing that people were actually able to help themselves with psychedelics, they actually ended up doing a lot of research on their own with different chemicals and different molecules that they would be able to get a PET done and be able to get through the FDA. So there's been more research for cluster headaches now than there had been in the previous 400 years. And a lot of that was because of this organization getting that word out there. And I would get contacted all the time about somebody wanting to write a story. And they would always contact me because part of the headline was about psychedelics. It's like, I don't know anything about these cluster headaches, but what are you people doing growing mushrooms in your house? I want to come over and interview you about psychedelics. And almost every time I would give an interview, it would start out as a story about psychedelics, and it would end up a story about cluster headaches. So just adding the word psychedelics into our language has got cluster headaches more publicity than they've ever been able to get before. Okay. Yeah, people hear the story about, well, I'll tell you why somebody doesn't mind, eating some magic mushrooms, because here's what they're treating. And I go, holy crap. Tell me more about cluster headaches.
Yeah. One of the other substances that we've come across recently that is very intriguing, but we have a very, very small sample size, is called Sonanga, which is kind of came into popularity because of ayahuasca ceremonies. And Sonanga is found, in the Amazon, and it's drops that are made from the Bachuda plant, I believe, and it's distilled in water, and you put them in your eyes. And they use them for ayahuasca ceremonies for clarity and for vision. And the indigenous people would use it for hunting at night and things like that. It was supposed to increase sort of their night vision and things like that. And we discovered really by accident, once again, by a patient that came to us. And it was so intriguing. This is a person with chronic cluster headaches who, after really about 10 days of using Sonanga on a daily basis, and it burns really, really bad. It feels like Tabasco in your eye. But he had 13 years of chronic cluster headaches every day, tried everything that we've had, and he was in remission in 10 days. And so we've tried to, we actually sent it to a lab to get it analyzed and look at the alkaloids. And, we found very, very small traces of ibogaine, which is intriguing. And I think volcanganine was another one of the alkaloids, and some other ones that we haven't been able to sort of figure out yet. But it's the ocular sort of method of delivery that's very interesting because a lot of the pain of cluster headache is really behind the eye. And so it's very intriguing, but there's another potential sort of, psychedelic that doesn't have an experience that seems to be working not just for clusters, but also for migraines, for trigeminal neuralgia, in a very small sample size. So to your point, I think that there are a lot of those tryptamines that are out there that we don't know about that could have vast implications for different aspects of disease.
Yeah, first time I hear about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're hearing a couple of first there, Tiets. And exclusive rights.
Yeah. One last question is something that I run a lot into, and maybe you guys are you probably run into the same thing. We were talking a little bit about like how people, they overemphasize kind of like depression and anxiety treatments for psychedelics, and I hear often, I mean, especially among like young crowds, I think, is something like, well, pain is unavoidable. The main thing to get rid of is like suffering, and that comes through like acceptance or something like that. And people tend to kind of like minimize physical pain. They tend to think like, well, no, the real bad is like in depression and like the anxiety and so on. But all the research that we have done at Qualia Research Institute strongly indicates that actually the most intense sufferings actually have more to do with physical, excruciating pain. And I wonder if you want to, maybe comment on this misconception.
I'll do make a couple of quick ones on that. Is what we have found is, first of all, half of this country lives in chronic pain. 50% of people in the U.S. live with some form of chronic pain. Chronic pain causes mental distress and mental health problems. People with cluster headaches is just one end up suffering from something called a complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's complex because it's not from some trauma 15 years ago. It's from the trauma that you just got through an hour ago and that you're going to go through again in 2 more hours. Yeah. You're living every day repeating that exact same trauma. And if you saw somebody in a cluster headache attack, you could understand the trauma that person is going through. Suicide rates 20 times the national average for people with cluster headaches. But in the case of cluster headaches and physical pain conditions, that chronic pain causes some mental health issues. So if a person goes into their therapist that's treating depression, they may go in and say, my depression is really terrible. They may not even mention their pain, what chronic pain they may have, because of the stigma around chronic pain. It's like if they're living with terrible chronic pain, they're already done explaining it to people because they just get told to take 2 aspirin and go to work the next day, no matter how bad it is. I've had one of those. So they don't even explain it. So they go to get their depression or their post-traumatic stress treated. But those will be caused by the physical pain that they're living through every day. So luckily, sometimes you can treat that depression or anxiety, unfortunately, you're using much higher doses than you need for the physical pain part. But sometimes you can get lucky and discover that, wow, that really helped my pain too. It's like, if you treat the pain, then you're treating the cause of that mental distress that you're living with every day. So you're eliminating the cause of your post-traumatic stress. You're removing the cause of the anxiety that you're living with, that you can't sleep at night, that you're afraid to go to sleep, or all of the other conditions. So with 50% of the country living in chronic pain, the odds are that 50% of any person going in to try to get treatment for mental health, 50% of those are being caused by their chronic pain.
Yeah.
And not the other way around, though that's separate. It's the chronic pain itself causing that mental distress.
Yeah.
And we're finding that the mental stress that's caused by cluster headaches is also treated by that low dose. It's not treated, it doesn't need 3.5 grams of dried mushrooms or 4.5 grams and 2 therapists sitting next to you for 8 hours. That's $3,500. All they need to do is have a year's supply of mushrooms in their house for $100 and just sit there through 4 hours of therapy with their spouse or their caregiver. And it's all gone. All the anxiety, the cluster headaches are gone, their anxiety is gone, the post-traumatic stress disorder is gone. They're no longer even in a diagnostic range for post-traumatic stress. When they were in a range that was probably 3 times the diagnostic range, triple the diagnostic range for post-traumatic stress. And a few doses, low doses, brings them down to 50% of what the diagnostic range would be, a 15 score instead of a 30 score, rather than living with an 85 score with post-traumatic stress. So that's one thing that really needs to be educated, especially with providers, because if they're able to provide psychedelic treatments to people with any mental health conditions, they are going to be getting physical pain conditions with people walking in the front door hoping that they're going to be able to treat their physical pain.
Yeah.
And a lot of those providers aren't trained in treating physical pain. Any stories they hear about the physical pain being treated, they see that as a side effect of treating the mental health condition. And it's honestly the other way around.
Yeah.
So you got to, it's like treating the cause rather than the side effect when you're actually treating chronic pain of all sorts of chronic.
Yeah, I reiterate what Bob is saying. And, one of the things that we really haven't mentioned during this is this particular condition is interesting in the sense that it's one of the most extreme pain conditions known to human beings. This is the sort of the most extreme pain that we're aware of as far as medicine is concerned. And that emotional, psychological, spiritual distress that goes along there is equally as extreme. And sometimes it's a comorbid sort of condition.
Yeah.
And one feeds off of the other. And at some point you wonder, even as a cluster headache patient, about the most extreme visceral pain you can possibly imagine, I can't put into words, that emotional pain and stress seems almost as bad. And what Bob said is that, psychedelics is treating both aspects of it. And, I'm sure Joe will say the same thing, but I had such extreme traumatic stress disorder that in itself was a disappear. And after using, psychedelics as my primary treatment mechanism, I don't deal with that anymore. At this stage in my life, like, I have my life back with all those burdens that I lived with before. And so the comorbidity of chronic pain and in mental health is something that, has to be shouted from the rooftops.
Yeah.
It's all,
Might say it's, yeah.
Yeah, it changed. It changed my perceptions of the pain. Also, I'm on when I first found psychedelics as treatment. It's that kind of, I wasn't as afraid of the next attack. I had something that I could combat it, but we're now. Yeah, and myself having experienced a lot of emotional trauma from 9/11. Losing 26 firefighters that I was, of course, with 4 guys from my company, dealing with all that emotional pain, and now having the physical pain on top of it. I could talk a lot about it, but I wouldn't minimize either one. In the moment, the physical pain of a cluster headache attack just prevents you from even thinking about anything else. But the emotional pain takes up all that time in between, and it's just as bad, and they both feed each other. Yeah, it's a terrible vicious cycle. Like that's the most ultimate vicious cycle that I've ever experienced in my life, is that emotional pain feeding the traumatic pain, and the physical pain, or vice versa.
Suffering comes in many forks.
Yes. One last question is interviewing somebody with cluster headaches who used DMT for relief of the pain. He also mentioned that he actually found MDMA to be useful afterwards, but as kind of like therapy for the complex PTSD from the cluster headaches. Is that something you've encountered as well?
That rings true with you as well.
I wouldn't doubt it at all. Usually MDMA on its own doesn't treat the cluster headaches, but piggybacking psilocybin and MDMA makes for a much nicer treatment for a lot of people, myself included. Yeah. And it's especially for people that might have experience with MDMA but not with psilocybin or acid, or if you just let them know if you combine these two, they come to us and say, I just really had an awful lot of anxiety and I don't know if I can do that. And it's like, well, combine these two and I promise you it's going to be a lot easier on your psyche to do this. So yeah, once again, that's research, on that particular thing. It's like, all right, well, give me 5 million and I'll see what I could do with combining MDMA and acid for treatments for 20 different, physical conditions.
Yeah.
There are so many roads to go down in research that should have started 50 years ago. We're 50 years behind on all that research.
Yeah.
And now, nobody talks about being a millionaire. Now it's people talking about being a billionaire. And everything that used to cost $1 million now costs $300 million. And it's a lot of really expensive roads. So sending your dollars. There's a donate button on our Cluster Busters website.
Please donate to Cluster Busters.
I'll also mention we have a sister organization called the Psychedelic and Pain Association that came out of Cluster Busters. And if you go on to the PPA website, Psychedelics and Pain Association.org, we have research going back to the 1950s on the relationship between psychedelics and pain of all different kinds. So it's not just primary headache, but there's a lot of applications back there. There's a lot of research that was done. Unfortunately, it was shut down in the 1970s, but it still exists, and we're really trying to ramp that back up again. So this isn't just headaches. This is treating pain in a novel way that I think we all feel is going to be a much bigger part of a treatment in the future.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so very much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And pulling all my energies to make sure, try to advance the cause as much as possible.
Thank you, Joe. We're always willing to talk, so stay in touch.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
That's what we do for a living. Bye.